Hi, I'm Andrew Rich, and if you're like me, you look at the state of modern wrestling discourse and think, wow, what a cesspool. That's why I'm here to tell you about Music of the Mat Remix. That's right, your favorite wrestling music podcast is back with a new format, where I bring on a guest and we play songs related to wrestling-themed topics. It could be a wrestling reference, a wrestling concept, a wrestling pun, things of that nature. Now you might be saying, Andrew, that is a very, very tenuous connection to pro wrestling on a wrestling podcast network. Is this just an excuse to hang out with your friends and talk about music and ignore the rest of the wrestling landscape? Yes. Yes, it is. So listen to Music of the Mat Remix on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast player of choice.
Hello everyone, my name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the #1 show all about the world of Joshi Pro Wrestling. Every other Monday, we're coming at you with news, show reviews, and previews of upcoming Joshi action.
So whether you're just getting into the scene or you've seen it all, this is the show for you.
Check us out on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network and wherever you get your audio.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. Fast to finger down. Stars tonight together. Here everybody's singing. You can't know what your part. Don't be far more what the truth.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for July 15th, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. And if you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site, where you can set up a one-time or recurring donation. You just click the red box that says sponsor this podcast. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside your other host, Case Lowe. And Case, this felt like one of, at least for me, one of the most concentrated wrestling weekends that I think I've had outside of a WrestleMania weekend in recent years. How was your last weekend going?
I greatly enjoyed it. It was kind of fun to be able to sit down at home on a Saturday, in July and August with my job and with Chicago as a city. It's music festival season. There's an absurd number of concerts in August that pertain to my particular interest, but I just happen to have a pretty dead weekend at home this past weekend. And so to get all in, which I watched we were talking about this in the Everything Elite Discord. What I'm about to say is not a flex by any means, but I watched the pre-show and then the first 3 hours of the main show, left and went on a date, and then came back and caught the finish of Hangman versus Moxley live. So an egregious and insanely long show, but a great show that was. I followed that up with the undercard of Arena Coliseo on Saturday, then went to bed pretty early, then 1 a.m. Central, rallied, got up, did Kobe World Live. I know typically we talk about the snacks we consumed during Kobe World. I don't know if you watched it live. I don't know what your mindset was there, but I did the Domino's pizza gimmick, outstanding. I did some Twizzlers, as is tradition. And I feel like over the last 10 years of doing Kobe Worlds live, the thing that has changed the most has been whatever energy drink I'm consuming. And I am within a deep addiction of the cola-flavored Celsius that has really taken a grip on my life. And so that is what we did on the morning of Kobe World 2025.
Well, first, I need to address your energy drink crimes.
Yes.
Celsius is a garbage drink with no flavor.
I do not agree with this whatsoever. I like the I was gonna call it Super Astro, but that's a luchador. I think it's like the blue. It's the blue Astro flavor. It looks like you're drinking like a bunch of molecules on the can. I really like that one. And then the cola flavor is I think that's what the end drink is with Gen Z right now, because there's a few people in my life that I would not describe as energy drink people like I am myself, but even they are into this cola Celsius.
No, I feel like Celsius and Alani might have
Alani's very big, yes.
I feel like that there is a certain market share in our minds for like Red Bull and Monster, basically, because they have been like the dominant brands for now, which it sounds ridiculous to say, decades now of energy drinks. That it's been in a lot of ways like a 1 or 2 person show. And I feel like the merger of like pre-workout into exercise drinks that kind of started before Celsius and Alani, I'm thinking about like the Reigns and the Bang Energies and like that, really I feel like opened ourselves up to at least drinks that make you feel awful much later and they taste awful. Like I just stick with Monster Peach. Like that's all I need. I don't get the Celsius and Alani's with that. But for me with Kobe World, I just because of kind of how my calendar landed, my July has been kind of insane. But I managed to kind of have a weekend where my wife already went on vacation, and I'm joining her tomorrow morning. And so what I kind of ended up doing, in case this is what happens when you're actually like staring down the barrel of 40, like as much as when you said I got the Domino's, you know, I did the classic there. I was like, oh, I remember the days when I would get a thin crust and then original crust Domino's, the 2 for $5 deal. Like I remember that. But there is a place that kind of I would liken it to very much a not like Jason's Deli, but it does like all kinds of prepared meals that I basically picked up a pasta bowl that I, between All In and Kobe World over the 2 days, I kind of picked my way through. It's like $12 and you're able to get like the protein you want, the kind of noodles you want, the sauce you want. It's really all I kind of wanted to do when I didn't want to cook for myself this week. And that's kind of what I did. But man, I thought about trying to raw dog it, go 7 hours of All In, catch a 2-hour nap, and then wake up, since I don't really have anyone else's schedules to really hold up. I was going like, I could do this.
Did you go to All In?
No, I did not.
Okay, and I felt bad asking. I talk to you every day, and I'm watching the show going, I
Is
don't
Spears
remember.
here?
I don't remember if Mike went or not, and I felt bad about it. But I just wasn't.
And I
sure.
wasn't like really on social media other than like my proposal of being the personal booker for Big Boom AJ. Like I kind of was like not as much on there. No, I stayed at home. And for those who live in Dallas Fort Worth or have been through the area, Arlington is not like inconvenient for me. The idea of having to leave my house at about 10:30, to be honest, and basically be like, well, then I have to go home and I had to figure out something to do about the dogs for the day. And I just kind of came to the conclusion that I would be so like I'd be so just thoroughly exhausted that I wouldn't be able to give Kobe World its real position in my mind. And to be quite honest, Kobe World was kind of my priority this weekend, so I decided to watch both of them all in live. And then the next day I woke up, took the dogs for a good walk, got home, made breakfast, and watched Kobe World. And I had a great time doing that. And I firmly believe if I went to All In right beforehand, I would probably be 10 to 15% more negative about the entire weekend. So I think I did the path to glory. And yes, I know that meant me staying home when All In is 20 minutes from my house.
I'm glad you made that decision. Obviously, much to get to with Kobe World. We're going to do a full and massive breakdown of this show. 2 notes before we get going on that. I didn't have a chance to do this on the J Show last week, and I admittedly, and I'm not fishing for compliments when I say this, I'm admittedly a little bit annoyed with my performance on that podcast. I don't feel like I was in the right headspace for any of the preview stuff for Kobe World, so I apologize for that, because I like giving this event, obviously, with the spectacle that it is, a little bit more coverage on Voices of Wrestling, a little bit more passion on the audio, and just for a variety of personal life reasons, it was like, I feel like I came in unprepared to that J Show and did not like the result as much as I should have. That being said, I did not have a chance to say this last week, but a huge thank you to everybody at Voices of Wrestling and everybody who consumes Voices of Wrestling content, as I did hit 10 years of covering Dragongate earlier this month, which is insane. That is a lot of time wasted on what has at times been the second largest Japanese promotion in all of wrestling. But I was very proud to hit that mark. If you have not seen on my Twitter, I shared a thread of 10 articles that I've really enjoyed writing, most of which are Dragongate related. So if you haven't read those, I would encourage you to do so. But 10 years of Dragongate coverage and 5 of you and I going weekly at this point is something I'm immensely proud of. So thank you to everybody who has consumed a second of this podcast, whether it's this episode is your first one, or you listen to the Dragongate USA series, or you're parachuting in from the Michinoku Pro series, whatever it may be, greatly appreciated. The other thing of note, we're recording this Tuesday, July 15th. I don't know when this episode is going to come out, other than that I know it'll be out on Wednesday, July 16th. Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central, I have another sit-down interview with Tony Khan that will be released. You'll see it on my social media. You'll see it in the Voices of Wrestling Discord, and you'll see it in the Everything Elite Discord if you're one of the few people in there as well. Tony and I went 40 minutes. We talked a lot about the current state of AEW, his changes and approach to creative. You know, the first time I talked to Tony was on a Zoom around this time last year, and the big question that people wanted to know, one of the big talking points was, explain to me who was, quote, in the room with AEW creative. And it was, you know, anywhere from 6 people to 30 people. And it was a whole big discussion. That discussion has gone away. Tony in the interview talks about why that has gone away. And I found his comments on that to be very interesting. Tony talked very openly also about his relationship with CMLL, how much it means to him, and how he was betrayed and, in his own words, double-crossed by AAA, which led to the demise of that partnership. And I don't believe Tony has told that story anywhere before. It is very interesting in the way that he spoke about AAA with clear pain in his voice, and then the passion that he used when describing not only the business relationship he has with CMLL, but the friendship that he has with Salvador, who runs CMLL. I thought all that stuff was very, very interesting. I asked him at one point if he envisioned a scenario, given WWE's role now owning AAA, if he was going to find himself in a position where he'd have to sign CMLL wrestlers like Mystico or Mascara Dorada to exclusive contracts in the same way that he has done with his other promotional partner with Ospreay and Okada, and taking them away from New Japan. His answer to that I thought was very interesting and very telling about the strength that is that AEW CMLL relationship. And then we talked about a bunch of all-in stuff. So Tony was very open. He was very honest. He was very funny in this interview. And it's one of possibly 2 sit-downs I'll get with Tony over the next few weeks. We're going to try to work out a second interview as well because we had such a good time doing this one. But you'll see that everywhere. It'll be up at 10 a.m. Central on Wednesday, July 16th. So if this episode comes out after that, I highly recommend a double dose of myself, get through this Kobe World review, and then you've got 40 minutes of myself and Tony Khan as well.
It's a case slow Wednesday coming up.
It is, yeah. You can call me Jenna Ortega. It's I'm going to be known as Wednesday Adams going forward. It was a very, very good time. I think if you liked the first in studio sit down that I did with Tony, I think you'll love this one because he was very excited getting out of the car and seeing me, and our conversation on camera was a real delight. So I don't know what other AEW content will be done while they're doing their Chicago residency. They've thrown a few names at me that I'm admittedly not stoked on. There's a few names that I've thrown at them of people that I really do want to talk to. We'll see if any of those work out. But the Tony Khan interview, again, 40 minutes of myself and Tony Khan, and really, really enjoyable stuff. But Mike, we're here. We've taken up 13 minutes of everybody's time, and we haven't talked about Kobe World. And I think it's time we talk about Kobe World.
Yeah, and I think the way we're going to handle this, and we will be reviewing the entire show from Sunday throughout this episode, but really, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't take some time to sit down with the main event, the Open the Dreamgate title match, YAMATO versus Shun Skywalker. Shun Skywalker defeats YAMATO, starts his third reign as Open the Dreamgate champion, and all of the events around that and the fallout thereof. And but before we kind of get into that case, I feel like we should go big picture. And big picture, what were your big takeaways of the biggest show of Dragongate's year? And I know your written reviews up at voicesofwrestling.com, but now that you have a little bit of distance from it, what were your big takeaways of Kobe World 2025?
I feel like this is a second tier Kobe World show. You know, if you want to put 2005 and 2011 and 2019 as sort of your gold standard, I don't think this show sniffed those in any way. I also think it's much better than a World 2017, a World 2018, a World 2022 when you take out the Open the Twin Gate match with Jason and Jackie and Shun and Diamante. So we're looking at a show that I would not describe as a middle-of-the-road show by any means, but rather a middle-of-the-road Kobe World show, which historically means good things. You know, I thought this was a really strong show top to bottom. I thought the main event itself, bell to bell, was absolutely thrilling. I thought the post-match angle, which of course we'll dive into here in just a moment, was incredible. I really liked parts of the Dragongate match. I loved the Brave Gate match up until the finish, and I found the no DQ match between Kakuta and Strong Machine J to be a deadly effective match, and it is the continued through line of that feud, which we've seen sort of morph over the last 2 months, is they're not reinventing the wheel by any means. They're not changing the game, but what they are doing together has been incredibly effective and efficient, and we got that again at Kobe World. So big picture, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I want to note, and then I'll get your thoughts on this. Last year's attendance, 4,795. This year's attendance, 4,890. So relatively flat. I do think the building looked much better than it had in years from a lighting standpoint and also just from a rows of chairs standpoint. The wide shots were not an eyesore. The hard cam I thought looked good. So in the building, things looked okay. I talked to one person who was at the show who did feel like there was a stronger crowd in terms of attendance than there was last year, which again, that number would make just a little bit of sense in that regard. But overall, I think had there not been a strong show closing angle, I still would have really enjoyed this show. But with that angle, not only did I really enjoy the show, but now I can't wait to see what comes next.
Yeah, I feel like it is not a top tier Kobe World. I think you eloquently laid it out. I would say that this really kind of was the kind of show that, the Brave Gate finish lands clean, and maybe they rethink a little bit of who's doing what in the Dragongate match. And maybe there's an argument to be made on that list, but I think it's pretty firmly a good solid B of a Kobe World. I think that's kind of where I would put it historically. Business wise, I'm glad you had that in the building note, because I would say at least watching it, the production did feel a little bit more tighter. It did maybe seem like there was more people on the floor versus the bowl in the second tier, and maybe that was also helping it be a little bit more full for people there in attendance. Maybe that had some influence with that coming across that way live, because my takeaway of the attendance was going to be, I don't think that that's a necessarily strong number to only have like a nominal jump with that kind of main event that now clearly like had months of build and all of that. I would say that it was a little bit underwhelming. I would say, just because like when I like in my mind when I was finishing up the Shun Skywalker and YAMATO column last week, I was kind of thinking like, okay, 5,000 is what I was thinking that the attendance would end up being with that. But overall, I think that it won't be really remembered for like the Bravegate match. That I hope they're able to go get other cameras, and not the camera that was the one that caught the Joker Stricer.
Well,
if
that's
there's one
the
that
funny thing is that, that's a finish that should be immortalized in video packages for years and years
Right.
to come.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to wind up in the Shima folder of footage that we'll never see again, and rightfully so. A quick note on attendance. I think this is worth noting. Now, I'm with you. I think this attendance is a slight disappointment. It goes in line with this entire YAMATO title run, and I have a lot of
business
thoughts.
wise, for sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this that I want to get into, because I found some of the conversation about YAMATO this week to be very interesting, in the opinions people shared in the Voices of Wrestling Discord. In 2019, they did 5,365. That was, of course, Susumu versus Flamita, the return of Ultimo Dragon, or rather the debut, a three-way twin gate match with Shimizu, Eita, Kai Yamato, Ishida, and Doi, and then your main event of Benkei versus Pac. The year before that was 2018. They did 4,952, which is just about even with what they had done the last 2 years, certainly closer this year. And that was headlined by Hulk and Yamada versus Benkei and Shimizu, a very awkward Tatsumi Fujinami and Yoshiaka Fujiwara appearance, and Masato Yoshino versus Shingo in the main event. If you go back to 2018, the analysis at the time was that the sky was falling, Dragongate was doomed. We were living in a universe where we probably put a little bit more, a little bit too much credibility into any Dragongate show flirting with 10,000 fans in this building. And so that number came as a real shock, because that was the first one since Shima and T-Hawk and Lindemann had left. That was the first one without all of Okamura's sponsors that were attending the show. And it was the first one without Okamura inflated attendance.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, I've had a note since that split that's worth saying with that attendance. In the company, they made more money off of that 2018 Kobe World than they did in the Okamura days, where they would claim double that amount. Like the financial relationship completely changed within the promotion, and that was always one of those things about 2018 and about the regime changes, was there weren't all the freebies for Okamura's friends, and who is to say necessarily where all that money from the show went to just to clarify that for 2018.
Exactly. Now, I think you have to really compare this to 2019. I wrote in the coming days before this show, I think YAMATO versus Shun this time around was the biggest match they've had since Benkei and Pac, and I do feel like it's maybe slightly revisionist history where, in 2018 Shima leaves and Dragongate absolutely does suffer in the short term. By 2019, you start to see some really healthy Cork and Hall attendances again. And then 2020, before the pandemic, I look back at those numbers a lot, because they were doing really strong houses at the start of that year, and COVID derailed things, and they've never really been the same since. I think had this show done 5,200, it would be worth shooting off confetti for Dragongate, because I think that's the sort of standard that you have to look at. You have to look at their business and compare everything to 2019 and just hope that you can get back to that level at some point. So to be under 5,000 is absolutely a disappointment. I don't think it's catastrophic. I don't think it's any major cause for concern, but I do think it would have been nice for the company to hit that nice round number of 5,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I land at least big picture wise. It's really something where I kind of go back to it. If the finish in the Brave Gate lands clean, and we i- if they get a consistent performance in that Triangle Gate match, I think that's probably the uh, critically appropriate way to say that. If all the performances were even, we probably would have this on that A tier at Kobe Worlds, but it just kind of falls just short of that because of like those little nagging things.
The other thing in terms of attendance, and I think this is worth noting because it was a concern that for me was a much greater concern a few months ago. The last time we talked to Jay before Dead or Alive, I asked him about their attendance and what they all made of it because I was so surprised that Yamato by that point had been champion since July. It was 8 or 9 months at that point. And I thought he was doing the best work of his career. I thought he was the best champion in wrestling. Earlier in the year, the conversation was who's the better champion, Yamato or Hiroki Goto? And Yamato held the title for longer and was more interesting far longer than Goto was. I think he ended up winning that battle. But we did not see the attendance growth that I would have expected. And I asked Jay if he was concerned by that or if he thought that was odd. And his response, I thought, was a telling one and a very measured one of it's not the fans that Yamato draws to the building. It's what they can do to set up the guy that beats Yamato so that he draws fans to the building. And so now I'm going to be looking at attendances very closely. I'm going to be seeing what draws. Between Shun and Kikuta, they have undoubtedly put them in a position to succeed. Whereas I would argue 2 years ago with Kikuta, he wins the Dreamgate belt. They do everything right getting him the belt, and then they set him up to fail for the next 6 months. And it was agonizing to watch that happen to his career. I think they have set Shun up perfectly. I think they have set Kikuta up perfectly.
Yeah, I want to go
really
back to this.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to note that I have a larger point about this that we'll get back to. But before I address like the business thing, like I think it's worth stating that without any shadow of a doubt, because I spent some time writing about this week, Case, this was the best built and the best executed Dreamgate match booked and performance in the Ryo Saito era. Like you look at how all these things were set up, like compare it to Kakuta in 2024 or 2023, where like they just didn't have a story. And even really, like, if you think about it with how Yamato and Ben kind of was set up, it was like, oh, Yamato has something to say and he's going to challenge because now he thinks the company needs a little bit of Yamato. And that was kind of all the build here. Like, this was, I have to say that positioning the new Dreamgate champion is, it's as strong as Ryo Saito has had any Dreamgate champion coming out of this event.
Absolutely, but that goes to the point that, you're right. If your critique on Yamato is that he didn't draw people to the buildings, objectively he didn't. It's going to be really hard for me to find a third place spot for him in the Flair Fez Awards this year because I think Mystico is your number one, and then you've got the Stardom roster that I really respected. Yeah, again,
I think Saya has that number 2 spot pretty much knocked up, and the people could make really strong arguments for Saya's number 1. To be honest,
again, I'm not up to date with the in ring of that promotion in the way that I want to be, but I'm blown away by their business. And as I said about a month ago, I am officially a Stardom respecter, and I really admire the work that they've done to fill these buildings. So you've got to have somebody from Stardom in there, and then between Hangman and Ospreay, And I think Moxley now needs to be in that conversation. There's AEW guys there as well. So even if I like Yamato's in-ring on the level of a Mystico and maybe even more than, say, a Hangman, although I've loved Hangman this year, I can't justify that spot for Yamato, but I also wouldn't change a thing about this title run. From a critical standpoint, this is one of the best Dreamgate reigns ever. I thought the booking of it was excellent. I've repeated myself for months now, but the best match we saw from Ishin up until a month later when he had the junior match, but the best match of Ishin's career, the best match of Daya's career, the best match of Strong Machine Jay's career, I feel like all of those guys were elevated as a result of challenging for Yamato. You have a super memorable Mochizuki match, a very memorable KZ match, and then you have this match with Shun. this is the type of thing where I have to sit here and trust the process a little bit because, again, there's nothing that I would have changed about the way that they handled Yamato's title run. And when you go back and look at the lineage of this Dreamgate title, it's really been a rough few years. It was a rough few years before Yamato got the belt because let's go back to the last time Yamato won it. So everything after Shun's Masquerade run, it's Yamato in 2021 where the matches weren't bad, but it wasn't exciting. It felt tired. He has a match against Minoru and nobody cares. He has a match against Hulk that I know you really didn't like. I liked it more than some, but it was a cold, awkward match. And then he had a match against Ben K in Sendai that was very, very good, but just no one cared. And then you get to the Kai run, which if you look outside of the Yoshida defense, was a very enjoyable title reign, but it's not like anybody has fond memories of Kai as an Open the Dreamgate champion. The Yoshioka run is the one that you can point to where he was doing such great work as champion. The thing I was thinking about this past week when I went through
Yoshioka was doing business too.
Yoshioka was doing business, but the weird thing with him, I started thinking about this week, is you have to remember, and I think this gets lost due to history because we don't want to think about this, and rightfully so, but Yoshioka's champion in mid-2022, and Japan at that point was still under strict COVID protocol. So even though Yoshioka was a great champion, it's not like it was this warm and joyous celebration of him being champion. Now, for COVID parameters, he was a draw, and he did have that match against Eita at Gate of Destiny where they allowed cheering, and it was a nice house and a big success, seemingly internally, and it was a nice moment. We all had that. But after Yoshioka, you have the Shun transitional reign, which goes into just a horrifically booked Kakuta reign, which goes into a cold Monte reign because of how he won the belt, and then the transitional Ben-K run. So you had a long time there, I would say, from when Yamato won the belt against Shun to when Yamato won the belt against Ben, where it wasn't like the Dreamgate Championship was awesome. And I don't think the Dreamgate Championship was thought of as one of the most prestigious world titles in all of wrestling, whereas it obviously had been going back to, 2010, 2011, maybe the Mochizuki run is really what put it over the top. And I think with Yamato, I think we got that back. Now, part of that is the competition, I think, has weakened. People don't think about the IWGP title in the same way they used to. The Ozawa stuff, has, I think, lost its luster, and I was never into it to begin with. So all of a sudden now Yamato has this great 11-month run with all these great matches. I think he really raised the value of that Dreamgate title once again.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's kind of tough right now about this, because I think that it very much with Yamato, where he was putting forth like the big championship matches and having the best matches of people's career, and essentially, I think if you take the matches and you average them out, you're probably going to end up with as good of a singles match record as star rating wise as someone who you would think would be the MVP of the G1. I feel like that was very clear for him there. The hard thing is going to be is evaluating Yamato's most recent Dreamgate run is going to be how much work this title run did for Dragon Dia, when Dragon Dia a couple years from now, or even just get in future title shots, it's okay, the old conditioning the fans to be ready for them on top when the time comes, whereas you did not need to have that with Shun Skywalker. He was the one that you could just hand him the ball when you were ready, because he, as you laid out, was the last person to have a really successful Dreamgate run. And that, if you want to do compare and contrast, that was with someone with the stiffest of COVID restrictions in comparison to Yoshioka. But I feel like that it's kind of okay, where do we go, or how do we think of some of these challengers, the younger challengers, of course, like KZ, you're going to feel the exact same about KZ in a title match next time as you did this time, as you did the time before that, and so on. But for people like Strong Machine J, for people like Dragon Dia, and even though it was not the strongest Dreamgate match, even for like people like Jason Lee. Now, a couple of years from now, if they succeed on that level, it's because of the matches they were having here. And I think that's the thing that kind of, when we talk about the Shima and Mochizuki runs in 2011, 2012, that in 2013, that's the thing that we're kind of missing. That the conversation sometimes is there now, but it's missing for Yamato for the most recent one, if that makes sense.
I mean, look, before Dragon Dia had his Dreamgate match in December, I would have never thought of him as a challenger. And now if he wrestles for the Dreamgate belt again, I'm going to be really into it because I know that he can perform on that level. Strong Machine J needed that match. Ishin needed that match, and Yamato got those matches out of them. And that's why 357 days as Dreamgate champion, look, I'm stunned. It did not do better business because, again, I wouldn't have changed a thing, but ultimately I wouldn't have changed a thing. I think it was really crucial for Dragongate to have this very calming presence and this great critical run atop the card because, again, he set the people that are going to follow him up for success. I think they can do that. I think they have the guys in place. If this was Shun Skywalker and Coach Minoura, I would not feel that way. But we've got Shun Skywalker and Madoka Kakuta in there, and I think that match is going to do very well in Tokyo. I'm very intrigued by what they're going to do. But all told, this Yamato run, I can't call it a grand slam because, again, you have the box office stuff that you have to take into account. But to me, it's an overwhelmingly successful reign. I don't know how you can look at it as anything but that. Again, just for the sake of getting out of that death spiral of Shun into Kakuta and to Monte and to Ben, the way we refer to the Dreamgate belt during those years compared to the way that we talked about it towards the end of Yamato's reign, I think is very important and very important for the company going forward.
Right. And you had Yamato do all that work to hand the ball over to Shun Skywalker in kind of the when we were considering all the options with Jay, and I spent a lot of time last week kind of trying to wrap my head around like, what does this match mean? Like the results coming out of it. You do with Yamato losing it here. There are kind of two questions I think that can be asked. And first, with Yamato, obviously he doesn't make it to Kobe World. He's not going to cross year as champion this time. Shima's single reign records of longevity and defenses remains kind of intact, but I guess the question is, Case, first, did they leave a little bit on the bone of Yamato's reign, or did they cut off at the same time? And secondarily, kind of going back to like Shun, is there someone else who you think they could have handed the ball to in this kind of manner? Because I've spent the last 72 hours trying to think about it, and it kind of now feels like it was always going to end this way.
I'll answer the second question first. There was nobody that should have beaten Yamato but Shun Skywalker. I think that was obvious in the lead up to the match, and that was obvious by the time we got done with it. The question was going to be whether Shun beat him here or Shun beat him down the line. I enjoyed these Yamato title matches so much that I would have been okay with them writing this until the wheels fell off. I would have been okay with a second Kakuta match and a Kai defense and a Kato defense and a Homare defense. And I would have liked to have seen Yamato versus Yoshioka for the belt. And I would have liked to have seen maybe Yamato versus Flamita for the belt or Yamato versus Monte for the belt. I would have been into all of that. If he would have really gunned for Shima's record, I would have been incredibly excited and invested in that. But time will tell. 2 days removed from Kobe World, I can't imagine them ending things in a better spot where it feels like a clear chapter end with the Yamato title run, and then we have this new, fresh story going forward. So Shun was always going to be the guy. Shun should have been the guy. That became obvious in January when Shun beat him, and we all held up a flag and said, that's got to mean something. We had our fun debating on who might beat Yamato, but it was always going to be Shun. It should have been Shun, and I'm very happy with that decision.
Yeah, I think that really when you look at the promotion and how it's, even if you go back to the Reiwa Big Six and everything that has happened 26 months since then. Eventually one guy was going to emerge, and it just always kind of felt like that in the promotion, in Dragongate going forward and even into this year, there were kind of the traditional kind of like, oh, you have Dragon Kid, you have Yamato, you have like that kind of thought. And then if you weren't hearing those names, you would be hearing one person, and it was like, oh yeah, that's Shun Skywalker's kind of promotion. And I do kind of think that after almost a full year as champion and a little bit, maybe I wonder what the plan B would have been, is kind of my way of saying, like, it feels like the person that you kind of need to see take the ball and see if they're able to get the houses back on track. You kind of needed it to be this guy. And secondary, and on the other hand, it makes me kind of wonder, was the plan B like, oh, could we go all and wait and rebuild Yoshioka and have him kind of also be a potential person to unseat him? Because
I don't think there was a plan B. I think they had a 7-month plan. Again, this goes back to the January Corkin where Shun very definitively beat Yamato, and I think this has been the plan. I mean, they've been blessed, which is a nice change of pace, especially over the last 5 years, where there were no catastrophic injuries that changed things. You know, we thought there might have been one with Shun. It turned out not to be an injury, but the Z-Brats guy stayed healthy. Yamato stayed healthy. Dragon Kid came back, added some artillery to Paradox. I mean, this seemed like they actually finally got to execute a plan and didn't need a plan B.
Yeah, and I think that with that, it kind of attention now goes towards Shun Skywalker coming out of Kobe World. So we've gone 40 minutes without actually talking about the wrestling in ring itself. The Dreamgate match was, I think, maybe it's going to be up to like, what's your cup of tea of Yamato match, but it probably, at least for me, was clearly one of the best matches of the company for the entire year. But the post-match angle, I felt like, was the thing that went from like, okay, we've had all of these great Yamato title offenses. The wall of Yamato has fell, and Madoka Kakuta is now waging a war against Shun Skywalker. Has basically all of Z-Brats turned against Shun Skywalker, who only really seems to have Hamare as an ally now. And what a fun angle to end out Kobe World with.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about the match. I want to talk about the match real quick, because it to me was the best Yamato title defense there was. It's one of the better Shun Skywalker matches in what has become an incredibly deep and incredibly exciting catalog of matches. I would put it as better than their prior Kobe World encounter, and that is a lofty statement, because I gave that 4.5 stars, but I would give this match 4 3/4. It's now certainly in contention to be a top 10 match for me this year. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. The thing that I continue to be blown away by is the hit rate that Shun Skywalker has in these big spots. And we're looking at a 9-year career with him being in positions, being in title matches since 2018. And he just always finds a way. You know, I think back to Yamato and BB Hulk versus Mochizuki and Skywalker from Dangerous Gate 2018. I believe that was Shun's first ever title match. One of my favorite Twin Gate matches of all time. And it's a match that is defined by Shun Skywalker. Now, if you've never seen that match and you're only familiar with Z-Brat's era Shun Skywalker, I think what Shun does in that match would shock you, because he's a high-flying babyface that looks like he's the lost wrestler from 90s Michinoku Pro. And a lot of that match is defined by Shun almost dying spot after spot, and you never really knowing if he's actually going to hit the offense that he's looking for or not.
The rope walks on that night might have been the most tenuous that they've ever been in his career.
Completely insane. But thus began a trend of title matches and tournaments and big spots where since 2018, I mean, you want to throw Ospreay in the mix, you want to throw Omega in the mix, you want to throw Okada in the mix. I'm not saying Shun's on that level when you consider the peak of pro wrestling that those guys have hit. But if you're going to go a tier below, I don't know who has a better resume than Shun Skywalker. This guy, I had zero doubts. That this match was going to be anything other than spectacular. What really jumped out to me, there are two things here that I want to touch on. One, just the physicality. That these guys beat the shit out of each other. They worked it in a way where it was the traditional Japanese epic structure that sometimes does not always behoove itself of a Dreamgate match. Every once in a while you get, especially with Yamato, historically, this has not always been the setting in which he shined. And I thought for 29 minutes, these guys had my full attention. I was completely enthralled by everything they were doing. I've said this about almost every Yamato title defense. A lot of them have been in the 24 to 28 minute range. And after each one of them, I thought, man, that could have gone longer. Like, I was really invested in that, and I wasn't quite done with it. And I thought what they did here was absolutely incredible. Everything, especially from Shun countering the Ragnarok. He goes for an Ashla attempt. Yamato counters that into a standing sleeper. That sleeper gets turned into a sleeper suplex where Shun falls right onto his head. He slowly rises up, and then the two trade lariats with Yamato coming out on top. This is when Yamato begins a barrage of go to hospital kicks. Shun survives those. Yamato hits a Galleria. Shun survives those. Shun counters a Ragnarok. He hits the SSW. That is not enough. And then Shun Skywalker eventually hits the moonsault and gets the big win. Absolutely incredible stuff. I mean, it is top-notch pro wrestling. The physicality blew me away. The other thing, and I want to talk to you about this, is that Yamato, other than the Ragnarok, which he did not hit, Shun countered every attempt he had at that. Yamato threw everything he had at this guy. And it just became very clear by the finish that the way they positioned this match was that Shun was the stronger, better, more talented wrestler than Yamato. That also makes, in singles matches in 2025, Shun Skywalker 3-0 against Yamato this year. And it's the fallout of this situation. This is the part that no one's talking about, and it might be the thing that I'm most interested in, is what does that mean going forward? Because in the wee hours of the morning before this show began, I talked myself into Yamato winning because I thought there's no way that he's going to lose 3 times to the same guy in a year. And then they did that, and Shun beat him clean, and Shun beat him definitively, and Shun was dominant in the finishing stretch. And I just don't know if that means something more in the future or not.
So I think that's going to be the interesting thing about this title run when we look back at it historically, because this is a title run that I feel like accomplished a lot of things at the same time, because there is definitely a way that you could say, well, Shun always had Yamato's number, and it just was a matter of time. Like, he had him since January, and all it was just, as he kind of tried to do it at the July Cork and say, like, I'm just picking like the right time for this for me to take this title because I'm Shun Skywalker and I decided Kobe World because that's when I want the most attention. So there's one way you're able to look at that title run completely through the eyes of Shun Skywalker, when this is still, like, as we were talking about, a title run that I think we're going to look back so favorably because of the staging and the preparation of like title matches to elevate young wrestlers. So I feel like that point is a very interesting one about how special this title run is, because it has like that level of multitudes, because Shun's story coming into this title match is almost completely disconnected with the rest of Yamato's title run. And I think that allows us to kind of have a lot of different perspectives going into this match and going out of it.
I just feel like, and this can kind of tie into the main event angle a little bit, the move here is not for Shun to join Paradox. I think there's a 0% chance of that happening.
No.
I would not be surprised if we see some Shun and Yamato tags or some Shun Homare Yamato trios matches going forward. I do feel like at some point, whether it's on a Kobe show or the August Corkin, I think Yamato is going to have to cut a promo and address the fact that Shun beat him 3 times, beat him in 3 different ways, 3 totally different matches, but the result was the same every single time. I feel like if we don't get that from the character of Yamato, it's going to be a little bit disappointing. But if you're going to ride with Shun as the guy, capital T, capital G, the guy, and he's going to be positioned as a babyface the way that he is, I do feel like that Yamato seal of approval is going to really matter.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be such an issue that they've had with unaffiliated champions, is that they have no one to team with, and they feel disconnected from the remainder of the promotion because they don't have like a unit to do trios and other kind of matches. So you only see the Dreamgate champion around just their matches. So they're absolutely going to find a way to tie Shun Skywalker into the rest of the roster, Shun and Hamare, because like objectively, like there's going to need to be some work being done, because you're not going to have Yamato be not Yamato, sorry. You're not going to have Shun Skywalker be completely disconnected from the rest of the roster the same way that Benkei was in 2019 or Shingo was in 2008.
I think the closest comp we have is in Ring of Honor when Alex Shelley got kicked out of Generation Next at the end of 2004, and he spent the early part of 2005 trying to regain the trust of the Ring of Honor locker room. There's a CM Punk Alex Shelley match in particular from one of the Ring of Honor 30th anniversary shows that I really enjoy. Part of the reason I really enjoy that match is, although in acting, you're supposed to show, not tell. There's CM Punk essentially did the first ever Roman Reigns, where he cuts a mid-match promo on Alex Shelley about how he doesn't respect him and how he's never going to win back the Ring of Honor locker room. That ended up with Alex Shelley turning heel again and joining the Embassy, and I don't see that being the result here, but I do think we have somewhat of a similar story in Shun here, assuming that he's done with Z-Brats and whatever comes of Z-Brats, with or without Hamare. I think that's the closest historical comp we have. You made the point of, hopefully by now, this is up in the air, but hopefully by now, Dragongate has learned their lesson in terms of having unaffiliated Dreamgate champions. My counter to that is they might not have to worry about it, because I'm not entirely convinced that Shun Skywalker will have a single successful defense during his third reign as Open the Dreamgate champion.
Yeah, that is the big question, because as Madoka Kakuta completely put Shun Skywalker into the dirt right after he was basically saying, hit my music, thank you very much for coming, good night, or Shun Skywalker's tagline, he knocks him out, knocks the microphone out of his hands, says, it's always this is a battle of the strongest, and I find you weak, and we're off to the races. Madoka Kakuta versus Shun Skywalker for the Open the Dreamgate title has been signed for Dangerous Gate and Oda Ward City Gymnasium.
I love the booking. I think the story here is pretty simple, and I think it's simple because I think we've seen it before. I think they're going to run back Shun versus Kakuta in the same way that they did Yamato versus Shingo in 2013, where at Kobe World 2013, Shingo ends Shima's big Open the Dreamgate Championship run. It's the start of a new era. Shingo's going to take us into the future, and then Yamato beats him in his first defense. Nobody saw it coming. I always like telling the story that at the time, Pro Wrestling Ponderings, PW Ponderings, which was a very relevant website because of the state of indie wrestling, and they covered indie wrestling better than anybody else. They were covering Dragongate, and the result of Yamato versus Shingo caused the reviewer to completely lose his mind and stop covering the promotion, which is so funny because in hindsight, it was such a brilliant booking move. I think they're telling the same story. I don't see any way that Shun gets out of Oda Ward City Gymnasium as your Dreamgate champion. And I think that puts a really interesting wrinkle in these things historically, because that will be Shun's third Dreamgate run, and it's the second time that it's been a transitional reign. It would be the second time that Kakuta has ended his reign. And now, if he's going to win the title again, he'd be one of the only people in history to win it for a fourth time. He would be, it would be him and Masato Yoshino as the only, and Shingo as the only four-time champion. So there's a lot of historical things at play here if Shun loses, but I think the interesting play is for Shun to lose.
Yeah, I mean, with the way that Kakuta was presented and has presented himself since Dead or Alive, and the definitive way that, not to veer completely off course, that the way that he absolutely obliterated Strong Machine J in the no DQ match, it really feels like, okay, yes, Shun was the right guy to beat Yamato at this time, but we are probably more in line to see, like, okay, what is the Kakuta-led heel unit going to look like? How is it going to be with him as champion? We've had that Z-Brats is coming up on 3.5 years, which is crazy long for a Dragon System heel unit, and even more so when you think it and RED are the heel unit since 2018. And it just, like, in a way, I'm just so I think it's going to be a zero key reign just because of it. The heel calculus side of it makes me think that it's time for that kind of shakeup. And then because Shun Skywalker is not going anywhere right now, he then enters that conversation the next time he's up there, that there's no one, that there's very few people that can claim them out of Dreamgate success that he's had. And even more so when you consider the compressed time period of him doing it as a member of this roster. He's already at 3 title reigns in under 10 years. And we're probably talking about a 4th one maybe before in the next few years after that, because I do think that he's going to be dropping it to Kakuta pretty much immediately. And it's the right thing for them to do. They that's their biggest building for the rest of the year. So you kind of have to take advantage of it and hit the ground running with this kind of storyline.
Are you at all, if we're both going to live under this idea that Kakuta is going to beat Shun, are you at all concerned about any lingering issues from Kakuta's last Dreamgate reign in terms of him not performing at the box office compared to this time around?
I think that, I mean, we have this this somewhat negative mindset about Kakuta's last championship run, but just as much can be said about it that it just felt like that the company at times just did not give him any booking. He was just kind of existing as Dreamgate champion. But when they gave them booking, you had stuff like this, the strong or the Big Boss Shimizu feud that went into Gate Destiny that year.
Yeah. For his reign, for those that don't remember, so he wins the title from Shun at Dead or Alive 2023. I think we would all say that the build of that was excellent. The story there was great. The execution was perfect. That was one of my top 10 matches that year. A super memorable moment. That was the start of the Reiwa 6th generation, as Kakuta called out everybody after that match. Cut the promo. Here we are today, living with the results of that. His next defense would be against Yuki Yoshioka at Kobe World that year. They were both members of D-Courage at this point. I've complained about this a million times. I'll make it quick. I thought this would be a chance for Yoshioka to lean heel a little bit and position Kakuta as a valued underdog babyface. And instead, they worked this very weird, very cold babyface versus babyface matchup with no juice. And I felt like at that point, Kakuta's reign was dead in the water. He would defend it.
And it's worth noting that this was not even put as the main event at Kobe World that year.
No, which the main event was a cage match, and I think that would have been the plan all along. I don't think the cage match was a last-minute thing. I get why they would headline with the cage match, but by the time we got to World, it wasn't like there was a debate of what should go on last. It was clear the cage match was the hotter match.
Right, yeah, and I think that that's something that needs to be it because they didn't provide any time for the Dreamgate, really, for that build. It was all about the build up to the cage match. And it feels like my point is, like, when they gave Kakuta stuff, maybe that title run was a little bit better than we maybe give it credit for, and that gives me a little bit more of a willingness to be open-minded about Kakuta probably winning at Dangerous Gate.
Well, the sole glimmer of hope is that Shimizu match, because after Yoshioka had the Kota Minoura defense, Minoura had won King of Gate, and it felt like somehow in one fell swoop that Minoura had righted some of his wrongs because he had a really good King of the Gate that year. But it all felt compartmentalized, where Minoura had this great King of Gate win, but it did nothing to heat up his match with Kakuta. It felt like it existed in a separate universe. So by the time they wrestled at Dangerous Gate, that match was also cold. The one shining spot is the Shimizu match because they built it up for months.
Mm-hmm.
Shimizu was excellent. The match was excellent. It was a really, really good time. And then, they had that stupid 3-way match at Final Gate that I still think Luis Monte's never recovered from since. And that was the end of Kakuta's reign. I just can't believe how good Kakuta is in this current role. And it all happened with a snap of the fingers. I mean, this was not who he was when he was a heel in RED. And that, you got to remember, that was 2021. And then he was out for all of that year. By the time that he came back in 2022, he was a babyface again. So it's been a long time since Kakuta's been a heel. He's completely changed as a wrestler since then. He just has experience now, which he didn't have when he turned heel. He turned heel months into his career, and he's knocking this out of the park. So if that's the decision they choose to make, I think that's going to be a good decision. I feel very bullish on the idea of a Madoka Kakuta Dreamgate run, given the current circumstances and his character output.
Yeah, and I think similarly this time, there's maybe a stronger mix of potential challengers for Kakuta. If we're already looking down that road, it feels like that just from the work of the Yamato run, there's now more of a possibility of having matches that even if the booking isn't there, you can go like, okay, Kakuta versus Diaz, a Dreamgate championship match. I'm really intrigued by the potential of that, and that's something that we wouldn't be saying without the Yamato run, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's well said.
So I'm trying to think of other parts about this that we haven't touched on. Heel unit, I think Z-Brat's days are pretty much numbered as Z-Brats. I wonder if it's going to be something that I've noticed in the last few months that was really prevalent at Kobe World. Everyone but Shun Skywalker has been wearing more of like these like mecha demon bunnies on their gear. Have you noticed that?
I have not, but I know what you're talking about now that you mentioned it. Yes.
Yeah, Kakuta's had it forever. Minora's added to it. I'm wondering if that gets clued into the next heel unit's like imagery and that becomes something about it. That's like my only thought kind of about this. Do you think we're getting the full rebrand coming soon?
I think so. I guess I'm a little less invested in that aspect of the story than everybody else is, because I know that was a big talking point coming out of these shows. I would expect Z-Brats to end. I'm a little on the fence about what to do with Homare. I want to talk about Homare before we fully move on from this topic, but I would expect Z-Brats to end. It might be a scenario in which Kakuta comes out at the August Korkin and debuts a brand new heel unit, and then Skywalker, for the time being, stays with the Z-Brats branding. I'll be curious to see if they do that or not.
I could see that happening. Yeah.
I think we're getting a new heel unit, and I think that's for the best. I thought they got extremely lucky, and again, it's up until they changed it, but they got extremely lucky by just pounding gold class variations into our lives that they eventually found a few that worked. I feel like logic would typically tell us, hey, we've seen a sizable shakeup in this unit. Let's go ahead and just give them a new unit. Let's change the branding. Let's change things up. I'm all for that. I'd like to see that. So yes, I would assume we get a new heel unit here sooner rather than later. And if we do, it'll be very interesting to stack up the legacy of Z-Brats at that point, because I do think this has become one of the greater heel units in the history of this promotion.
Yeah, when that time comes, I think that'll be a real fun, interesting conversation. Let's talk about Homare. So Homare I should have pulled up the Gaura website before doing this. By the way, happy 35th birthday, Gaura. Like, that was something that they made a point of on the telecast from Dragongate. Yeah, Homare and Shun are still both listed as former members of Z-Brats on the Gaura website case. So the decision is not yet to be made, but I feel like we're about to see one of the real divergent points for Hamare's career, especially if he ends up going with Shun into being just the two of them or whatever it is as a post Z-Brats kind of situation for him.
So for those that don't know, there are a bunch of house shows this week starting on July 19th. All of those house shows have Shun and Homare teaming with one another, completely separate from Z-Brats. July 20th, by the way, is the Madoka Kakuta Homecoming show. So I'm really hoping we get some footage there, because I would really like to see that show. In the same way that I was complaining a lot to a lot of different people about not seeing Hyo's Homecoming show on July 1st. And then the network decided to randomly upload 3 house shows, and that was one of them. So that worked out nicely. We will get the July 23rd Boyuden show. That will air. That'll be the first thing that airs after Kobe World. That's next Wednesday. And then the first Dragongate proper show that airs will be Sunday, July 27th. We do not have a card for that yet, but I would not expect any movement in terms of official unit positioning with Shun and Homare until we get to Kobe and realistically until we get to Korakuen.
Yeah, but it does. I do think if we're seeing Shun Mare kind of becoming its own thing, Hamare, we're not going to really see necessarily as protected as Hamare has been. Like, yes, he's taken falls, but we've known how like Hamare as a rookie has been treated completely different than that. I'm gonna be real fascinated because you're not going to have the ability to really hide him as much anymore with Shun and him tagging on all these shows, and he's probably gonna be eating a lot of falls. And I just think that's going to be an interesting kind of twist for him as we close out July, seeing what this all evolves into.
I don't know. So July 19th, it's Shun and Hamare against KZ and Flamita. July 20th, it's Shun and Hamare against Ishin and Kato. And then July 21st, it's Shun and Hamare against Jason Lee and Kai. As odd as this might sound to you, I don't see any reason why Hamare can't pin KZ, or more realistically, why Shun Skywalker can't pin KZ on the 19th.
That's true. That's
and then
true.
I would assume that the matches on the 20th and the 21st, the Z-Brats matches, those are probably going to go to a no contest. So I don't see this being a position where Hamare becomes this de facto loss post. I think they want to keep him away from that. And I also think just by the process of what they're booking, I think they can avoid it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point about the no contests. I could really see that happening for those. But that was the Dreamgate match.
Well, let me ask you a month out from Dangerous Gate and a few weeks out from that Korakuen show. Is the death knell in Shun Skywalker that Hamare leaves him and goes back to whatever Kakuta's doing, or do you think Shun and Hamare stick together?
Oh, I think they're absolutely sticking together now.
Okay, interesting. I do too, but I didn't think you were going to say that because this is partially just a taste thing, because I remember when AEW started and they had MJF as Cody's second a lot of the time. The point that I made was those guys should be together for years. Like it was really the timeline that I had in my head was when Cody actually left AEW should have been the time that MJF finally turned on him. And I don't know why it is in wrestling. I think we are so quick to turn on friends and to lose these bonds. And I think this Hamare bond with Shun could be a really interesting thing, so that eventually, if Hamare sides with Shun, the long run here is that eventually Hamare turns on Shun and that you get rewarded for that. And then you get rewarded for when somebody turns on Hamare and he finally becomes a babyface. But now we're talking 4 or 5 years in the future. But I think with a prospect like this, that's how you have to think. And I would rather just keep Hamare aligned with Shun for the time being, and then play the long game of Hamare eventually turning on Shun, and then somebody turning on Hamare, a year after that. And then by that point, he'll be 26 and ready to take over the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the marathon, not the sprint with Hamare. And like, I wouldn't even be thinking about taking Hamare away from Shun until they're in whatever that face unit is down the line, which is, I don't see it. If we're going with, okay, Shun zero key to Kakuta, then I think at that point, Shun and Hamare as a 2-person unit, you could go for a while with them, especially with how this company has been about 2 and 3 people units. Like, you could probably not even address the face unit that they would form until 2026. And then, yeah, you're talking 2027 before you'd want Hamare to turn on Shun.
I do think we're going to see Shun and Hamare stick together. I would not be surprised to see Monte get thrown in the mix there. As I look through the rest of the unaffiliateds, it's slim pickings, but you could always lose a guy from Paradox. You can always lose another guy from Z-Brats, and you've got the Mochizuki Dojo kids as well. So I think
Monte and Daiki would be enough.
Monte and Daiki would be very, very interesting. And then, for whatever reason you want to throw Kagatora in the mix or something like that, I'm game. So I think there's enough guys on the roster, or, maybe it's Kai, maybe it's Ishin. Again, I'm really excited about the possibility of an Ishin face turn. I would like to see that at some point. So there's guys there. I would encourage Dragongate to not have Shun and Hamare on an island, because I think they actually have enough depth on this roster to get them a full and proper unit when that time comes. And if it's just Shun, then then I think it's very interesting, because then I think Shun can join an existing unit. He can poach guys from other units to make a super unit. There's a lot that Shun can do by himself. But if it's Shun and Homare, I still think the roster is deep enough to where you can actually get them a proper unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, because like even like far out, like Yoshioka and Shun, even though they have all that backstory, it does kind of feel like you can reapproach those two down the line in units together, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Twin Gate title match, it was Minoli making a successful defense against Benkei and Hyo of Love and Peace. I felt like that this title match, when you like look at all the other title matches on the card and issues that they had, with the exception of the Dreamgate, this one ended up being like the second strongest match on the show, which was not what I was expecting. But when I woke up on Sunday and booted up the Dragon Gate network case, I thought that this one, I was like, okay, you know, I've really high expectations for the Brave and the Triangle. And, you know, if the Twin is great, then we're talking all-time Kobe World, baby. Let's go. And instead, what we had was what I thought was a strong match in Minoura and Lee's second title reign, and one of the ones that I felt like that was not as heel shtick kind of just like dependent as I felt like Minoli has been this tenure with the titles. What were your thoughts about this semi-main?
I thought it was good. I really thought Ben and Hyo were excellent, and I'll save my Love and Peace thoughts for the Triangle Gate match, because I have a lot of Love and Peace thoughts. I came away very, very disappointed with the result of their weekend, but there's very clearly magic. I don't know if that's too strong of a term. I'm gonna keep it though. There's very clearly magic with this Ben and Hyo team. That is a bona fide Twin Gate team of two stars that wrestle well as a tag team. And if they're not going to become Twin Gate champions at World, we got to find a way to run it back pretty soon, because we got to find a way to get these guys the belts. I think they could do absolute wonders as champion, and I think that's the perfect usage of someone like Hyo. He's been a Brave Gate champion. He's been a Brave Gate champion relatively recently. He feels slightly above that belt now, and he's not going to be a Dream Gate guy. So the Twin Gate belt is the logical option for him. And I thought Ben and Hyo did everything they could to get something interesting out of Coach Minoura. And it took Minoura forever to fire up. It was really only until the last 2 or 3 minutes that I felt like we got something out of Minoura. Jason Lee was great as always. I think Jason Lee's chemistry with Benkei is really, really good now that Jason's bulked up. So a good match. Certainly one of the weaker Twin Gate matches in Kobe World history, but that's just because of the litany of great Twin Gate matches that we have.
Yeah, and the way that this heel team works. I just really enjoy Ben and Hyo together, and I guess I'll save that a little bit more for the Triangle Gate. But Benkei just really put his body out here in this match. And you had his concussion spot, but this time with the jumping knee, it looked even more brutal than this. Instead of doing the spear into the turnbuckle, he just does the full Biggie spear through the ropes. I've always appreciated Benkei as a wrestler and in these kind of Kobe World appearances, but I feel like we're almost to a point where we could probably make a pretty fun 2-minute music video of just crazy spots he does at Kobe World that are just like him throwing his body through things, because there was a lot of that in this match. I think that you had like certain kind of moments, especially with Minoura in the closing stretch, that had me I come away with this, and maybe it was because how relatively deflated I was by the end of the Triangle Gate match. I was like, okay, I felt like the closing stretch felt like a Twin Gate match here, and maybe that's why I had it a little bit higher. I was 4, and I was 4 on this, and I really wanted to see more of these kind of matches in Minoli's reign. I know that's not what the character work is right now, but just it just, we're at a point here that this would have been the time to get the belts off them. And because we've done enough of the heel interference leading into the direct falls or low blows and powder attacks, but they retain, and if they have more defenses, it'll be more of this again. And I'm kind of tired of that with Meno Lee at this point.
Well, the point I made in regards to the Bravegate match last week was that if UT's reign ended at World, we would look back on it with nothing but positive memories. We would applaud UT for the work that he's done. We would applaud UT for putting that belt in the position that it was in. And then we would be excited about the person winning the belt going forward. I feel like we were in that same spot with the Twin Gate belts where it's been a very oddly paced reign. They win the belts when they do. They have almost no defenses for the first part of the year, which is very strange, very unlike Dragongate. And then we got to this point, and I felt like they had the right team in there to beat them. I also felt that way about the Triangle Gate match, and I guess we can sort of parlay that into this. But
yeah, let's do that.
I feel like the story. Oh, well, I guess here's the caveat: is that even though Shun is Dreamgate champion, you can't ignore the possibility of Shun and Homare versus Meno Lee at some point. And if they do that, I'm going to be incredibly into it. And I think that's a really exciting match. That feels like that would be a very big, say, Osaka #2 match that they could do for their summer show in Osaka. If it's not that, then I don't know what we're doing here, because I do feel like Ben and Hyo were the perfect challengers and the perfect guys to win the belts. And I would like to see them in the same spot at Dangerous Gate, where maybe it's, Meno Lee defending against Ben and Hyo, and just for the sake of conversation, we'll say Daya and Yoshioka too, and maybe Ben and Hyo come out there. But I was so surprised by this decision, just because I felt like it was less about what Minoru and Lee have done as champions, but more that they had the right team to beat them, and they didn't have that team win.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard to come away with the match of necessarily like the most positive taste in your mouth when the situation presents itself and they don't act upon it. Let's talk about that Triangle Gate match. It was a traditional elimination 3-way. Champions going in this match with the Young Brats trio of Ishin, Yoshiki Kato, and Homare versus the Love and Peace trio of Jackie Kamei, Rita, and Mochizuki Jr., and Team Mexico of Flamita, Luis Monte, and Bedito. Let me run through the falls. About 10 minutes, and Ishin caught Junior with a jumping death penalty submission. Yes, Ishin basically jumped on his back and pulled him down. It was very sick. That was the first fall, and then the second fall was Flamita hitting a picture-perfect Phoenix Splash. Team Mexico are the new Open the Triangle Gate champions, and it was at this moment I was pretty getting the belts off Young Brats. I was like, oh, I think that means Shun's not long for being Z-Brats much longer.
Yeah, I'm stunned by this result. It's a tale of two matches. I thought Z-Brats, Love and Peace, and Team Mexico as the three teams in there.
Excellent. Best double German suplex, I think, maybe ever in that match.
It's in the context of Dragongate, absolutely. I mean, you'd have to compare it to the best that Sakamoto's ever done, and the one Kurt Angle one with Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio. So we were on our way to an incredible match, and it's not even that Love and Peace didn't win. It's that Love and Peace were the first team eliminated, and you saw the air get sucked out of the room to some degree when they got bounced. And my biggest complaint with Dragon Gate booking time after time, especially in the last year, because Yamato's righted so many of the wrongs that were happening with the Dreamgate picture, where my big complaint used to be that Ryo Saito would get too cute when it came to Dreamgate booking. It would make things too complex. It would water down this title. They fixed that. But the way that they beat these guys like a drum, I just do not understand. Mike, tell me how many successful title defenses Jackie Kame has had in his career.
I don't think he's had a single one.
He has not had a single one. He is a 2-time Triangle Gate champion, and it's been 2 years since he's held that belt, and a 1-time Twin Gate champion. He has 0 successful title defenses. And I don't get it, because I think this company, the biggest competition they have is the fact that wrestling has caught up to what they do. I complain about this all the time, especially whenever I see a clip of WWE and it's people doing high spots, and it's wrong. It's an abortion of pro wrestling, because they're doing Dragon Gate without the things that make Dragon Gate special. And it really bugs me, because I don't think people call it out enough. when I watch Kame in a big spot, I talked earlier about how Shun always seems to deliver in these big matches. Kame's in the same boat. Now, it just so happens that a lot of times they're in the same big matches, which helps greatly. But Kame's in the same boat, where in terms of big match wrestlers, I just don't think there's many better in the world than him. And they continue to beat him like a drum. And I'm not saying that a prolonged Kame Bravegate run, or if you want to put the tag belts on him and Rita, I don't think they're going to be doing 1850 and Cork and Hall just like that, just because they've got Kame winning these belts. But what I do think is true is that Kame and Rita specifically, and even more so Kame, for as much as I love Rita, this is a Jackie Kame conversation. He continues to push the limits of pro wrestling in a way that other people aren't doing. When I watch Kame in the ring, I think he is authentically Dragon Gate, and it is your biggest W of all time that you scoped this guy out from the beginning. When I was too distracted by SB Kento, and I stand by everything I said about Kento in 2020 and 2021 before he left.
Hey, I lucked into this W versus me completely calling what was happening in the main event this show. Okay, the Kame W, that's one thing. Me writing down almost exactly what was going to happen at Kobe World in my column for the main event. That's a real W. The Kame one, you picked a guy. There was another guy there. I picked Kame because I was like, oh, his name means turtle. That's interesting. And I just ended up being right.
You very early on, you said this guy has a higher ceiling than I was giving him credit for, and you were absolutely right. And now we're at a point where I think Dragon Gate, I think, is on par with being the best book company in the world. I think AEW, in their build to All In, has made a real stake for that, or a real claim for that position once again. I think Dragon Gate's been more exciting than CMLL this year. I think there's been some great CMLL moments and some great CMLL matches, but I'll take the Dragon Gate booking over what's going on in Arena Mexico right now. But the way they squander opportunities with Kame, I just don't get it. Because time after time, this guy delivers. And it's just one of those things where you should want to wheel this guy out there and say, look at what he can do. Look at this guy. He's young, he's good looking. Oh, and he's also, on his worst day, one of the 15 best wrestlers in the world. Like, I just don't understand why they won't give this guy a chance no matter what. And regardless of what you think of Team Mexico, and we can talk about the Bandito thing in just a minute, I weirdly feel
I have a way to tie the Kame and Bandito together when they're done.
Look, I'm thrilled that Flamita is sticking around, and I'm thrilled that they continue to respect Flamita in the booking the way that they do, because I think he's more than earned it. But it's coming at the expense of Rita and Junior, who I think will very, very much have their day, and with Junior in particular. But the Kame thing, I just don't get. I cannot believe that this guy's 5 years into his career with 0 successful title defenses. It's been 2 years since he's held a title, and I just don't know what else you could do. This was a guy that I was thinking about this week. A year ago, the Rey de Parejas kickoff for 2024, it was Kame and Monte. I'm sorry, it was Kame and Jason against Monte and Hyo headlining Cork and Hall. And it was one of those rare matches where it happened at just the right time, just the right month, just the right building, just the right setting. And Kame gets the win over then Dreamgate champion Luis Monte in the main event. And we came on this podcast and I asked you, I said, would it be crazy if Kame challenged for the Dreamgate belt in Cork and Hall? He couldn't do a bigger building than that, but would it be crazy if they did Kame versus Monte for the Dreamgate belt? Because it feels like they could build to that and that people would get behind Kame. And of course they never did that. And then Big Hug happened. And we all thought during the formation of Big Hug that it would hurt Vibes, and then somehow it hurt Big Hug instead, and that unit became a failure. And then he bounced back and found his way into Gold Class, and then they changed Gold Class to 11-piece, and they're still making it work. This guy always makes it work, and he doesn't get rewarded for it. I think it's malpractice what they're doing with him. I think it's crazy, the fact that not only did they not win this match, but they were the first team out, because you felt in the building the life leave that building. Because when Kame and Rita and Junior are in the ring, you feel like anything can happen. And for as good as Monte is and for as good as Flamita is, they do not bring the energy that Love and Peace have. I could not believe this result.
Yeah, and I have to say, them being out first, Case, I know you very eloquently went on a diatribe and you're catching your breath right here, but I got a quick question for you.
No, please.
Who does Bandito have the best chemistry in ring with, if anyone, of the native roster?
It would be, I think, 1, Rita, 2, Kame.
then why do you put yourself in a situation to take the people that this guy who's had a very, to be charitable, up and down tour, why are you handicapping him by taking away his most trusted people to work with for the last part of this match, the money part of the match?
It's completely bizarre because I wrote in my review and I said it when we started talking about this match, but the first up through the first fall, the first 13 minutes, the match that it reminded me of was the 2019 Twin Gate match.
Yeah, that 3-way Twin Gate match.
Yeah, with Shimizu and Eita and Ishida and Doi, and then I forget who the third team was. I know I talked about this match earlier, but I forget who the third team was. But that's Yamato and Kai. That's a match that I went 4 3/4 stars on. And when you look at the cage match rankings of the best Dragon Gate matches of all time, that one is incredibly high. And I'm not saying that this match had Love and Peace gone all the way and gone to the final fall. I'm not saying that it would have hit those highs, but in my head, as I'm watching in real time, that was the match that I kept on thinking about because they did a brilliant job of incorporating 3 wrestlers at a time. At the very least, if it wasn't 3-way spots, it felt like they were incorporating the 3-way dance vibe of this match incredibly well. It wasn't just a ton of prolonged one-on-one sequences, and if it was stuff like Junior and Ishin, who just knocked it out of the park once again because water is wet. What else would they do? And then, you get Kame out of there, you get Rita out of there, and then, you get Junior out of there. And the match fell apart after that. I feel like this is going to be my most controversial ranking because I still went 4 1/4 on it. Now, again, the Bendito stuff, for whatever reason, bothered me less than it did other people. I don't know if that's the best way to phrase it. I didn't think it was as bad as some people were saying, but it certainly wasn't good. Wasn't good. You had to rely on, once again, the bizarre chemistry of Flamita and Ishin, and then Kato actually, I thought, coming through nice in the clutch and having a nice finishing stretch with Flamita there.
Yeah, this was a strong Kato performance, and I felt like he ended up kind of with how the match was presented. Like the best way that final fall was going to be if Kato showed up, and he did. And when I felt like that in the past in Young Brats, or just in general, I feel like he sometimes is the member of Z Brats that leaves you a little lacking. But yeah, it's a situation. I'm 4 flat on this match. If you reconstruct the falls around, I think you have a 4.5 star match here. But it's just if the way that they're booking and with Team Mexico, like I mean, like the downside of it is that who was the better in-ring team and the team that you could easily have the best matches out of anyone in the Triangle Gate division, you all decide to eliminate first instead of having them work the entire match.
I think that's well said. I think with Kato, they don't need him to be anything more than what he's doing right now. He just has a couple like shaky moments as a heavy. He does. To be clear, it's not like, look, I mean, Kato wasn't in my 30 under 30. I didn't strongly consider him. He was a pretty easy cross off when I looked at all the Dragon Gate guys. Yeah. But I'm not concerned about Kato because when you look at the structure of this unit, maybe it would be different if Homare hadn't been in the fold, but there's only so many slots, and they seem to be very comfortable with him existing largely in the undercard and then doing I don't want to say the bare minimum, but the things that you would expect from him and nothing more than that. I think Kato will eventually have the ability to turn it on and to hang with the best of them. I just don't think they need that from him right now. I'm very curious to see when he gets heated up, if he can succeed. But I do almost feel like it is a conscious effort right now to keep him doing exactly what he's doing because they don't need more from him right now. And I do have to say, I loved him when he unmasked Flamita. He launched that mask into the crowd. I thought that was super entertaining.
Yeah, no, him with Flamita and the mask was really entertaining. I guess the thing for me is that we're now at a point that this is Kato's longest stretch without an injury. Yes. And he had a couple very tough ones that took him out for extended period of time. And I guess now, like, he's been back now, what, 9 months at this point? He came back like in November of last year or thereabouts.
Yes, yeah, that sounds right.
Now that he's getting a lot more ring time than he did before, it's hard to like sometimes evaluate him because yeah, he's been on the roster for now almost 4 years, but he's been off, but he was out for injuries for about 2 years and 3 months. And now this is a time where like, yeah, no, he in this match he showed up and did that and did the heavyweight big man spots when you wanted him to. I feel like for him, like he's on like this different timetable that you know that they're wanting to get him kind of in a position where like to have him with Kakuta like standing up top and out in the front, and maybe that's where I'm kind of wanting to see him be doing a little bit more of heavyweight or more of the main event stuff, and he just doesn't seem capable of that right now, and that's my point.
I think I have to see him fail in that spot before I can co-sign.
But he's not even
that.
Positioned to even be in those kinds of things.
But
I would have.
But they have Ishin, and they've focused on Hamari, and they've had Valletta in for part of the year, and Minoura has bulked up to an astonishing degree. I thought I don't know, he had the body of Homer Simpson on this show. I don't know what happened, but
he might be 105 kilos.
I was like, my God, he looks like he ate 2023 Kota Minoura. I don't know what that's all about, but good for him, I guess. Kato has been bare bones pro wrestling muscle, when he's asked to turn it on, and if he fails, I'll come on to be the first one to condemn him. But I think they've kept things simple with him for a reason. And with all of the other happenings in Z-Brats, again, part of it being Valletta being in for the first part of the year, and the elevation that we saw in the main event level of Jason Lee, which felt warranted. And if I had the pencil, I would certainly focus on the Jason Lee Dreamgate match before I would focus on a Kato Dreamgate match because of the 8 years of work we've seen from Jason prior. This all just seems like he's waiting in the wings. And at some point, they're going to hit the on button on Kato. And then we're going to come on here and go, hey, you know who's really good right now? Yoshiki Kato.
Yeah, I maybe I just want that moment already, and
that's
just
fair.
not.
I do too. He was so exciting as a rookie, and I loved the Ray Day Parejas we've got with him and Kaito Nagano. That was such a fun team, and then that's what led to his first injury, and he was gone for forever. Then he came back, turned heel, and then got hurt and was gone for forever. And we'll have to see. It's been a very tough start to his career, but I have faith in him.
And I have to say, for his first Kobe World performance, he left us with a good taste in our mouths.
Yeah, he was lockstep with Flamita the entire time, and that's really what they asked of him was don't fuck up the finish. You didn't fuck up the finish. The Bendito thing, we got to talk about this.
Yeah, it's countless times just like out of position. Rita bails him out. Kamei bails him out a lot, and it's just. Well, it's tough. I feel like, at least. Was that the Bendito situation you were wanting to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Just, I feel like he's had worse performances this year. This was not the one that jumped out to me as Bendito being egregiously bad.
I think it's that it was Kobe World, and more people will turn on a Dragon Gate Kobe World show.
100%. Because there's been, whether it be Kobe shows or Osaka shows or whatever, where it's like, that's when I tug my collar and go, are we sure this guy's a Dragon Gate wrestler? And this just happened to be the one that more people saw. And you're right, Kame and Rita bailed him out. I think he got into a little bit of trouble in that second fall. Look, my argument's not that he was good. My argument is that this performance bothered me less than other performances have. I think the tough thing for me is that I want them to open that gate. I want them to embrace the unaffiliated Mexican stars. But man, do I want like the Panther brothers in instead of Bendito. I think that's where I've landed, is that I want that Bendito spot to be a permanent fixture. I think I'm ready for it to not be Bendito, but he's a Triangle Gate champion, so.
Yeah, maybe. I know that the original talk was him going home after Kobe World. Maybe. I mean, I like to remind folks, Diamante was not good when he first came to Dragon Gate.
No, he wasn't, and he was in a position where, I mean, you got to remember, Diamante came in to be Ultimo's bumper You know,
Right.
he was
Yeah.
brought
No,
in as almost friend
absolutely.
of the guy that, and once he left a setting without Ultimo, he got exposed pretty quickly. But then after the lapse and shows during the pandemic, he started to put it together from there. But we were calling for his head in October, November of 2019. We thought he was the worst foreigner they had ever brought over. So I get it, but I feel like there are spots that could be filled with more talented wrestlers than Bendito. So we'll have to monitor that. I know people were two things on this. Look, the plan at some point was for Monte to go home and get a vacation after Kobe World. So needless to say, I was stunned when they announced the Monte Flamita versus Alpha Wolf Dragon Beta match for the August Korakuen, because that went against directly what I had heard from sources that I trust on Monte getting a vacation. And Bendito was going to go home after Kobe World, and then they extended his stay for, I would assume, a month. I would assume until Dangerous Gate, but this was definitely not the original plan.
Right. Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see how things kind of go with Bendito and Monte in August, given that. Any other thoughts about the Triangle Gate before we get to the special tag?
No, I don't know when they're going to turn it on for Kame. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it. I know that for like Hyo, it took him basically like a Brave Gate run before he kind of figured it out in a way. But it just like maybe there's just like some mindset of, oh, he's probably in his 5th year of wrestling. Maybe that's when they give him that, but it just doesn't seem like that. It's frustrating. Yuki Yoshioka and Dragon Dia, the original D-Courage team, had a special tag team match against Dragon Kid and the president of New Japan Pro Wrestling, the once-in-a-century talent, Hiroshi Tanahashi. And it was exactly what we expected it would be, pretty much beat to beat. Tanahashi gets the win with a high fly flow after Yoshioka does a frog splash of his own, about exactly beat for beat what one would expect when you saw this match on paper. In the post match, Hiroshi Tanahashi praises Yuki Yoshioka's frog splash, likes the fact that there's going to be someone from Ogaki Gifu keeping up in pro wrestling, and he bestows the high fly flow in Dragon Gate to Yuki Yoshioka and tells Yuki Yoshioka, you need to become an ace, and I want you to be an ace, so pick it up here. And Case, it was basically exactly what we expected. Maybe Tanahashi seemed like he was a little bit more agile than we've seen him in other major singles matches over this retirement road, I would say.
I have no thoughts on this other than that I found the post-match promo to be one of the funniest things I've ever seen. As New Japan dives deeper and deeper into a youth crisis.
Yeah.
Where, I cherry pick New Japan heavily. I'm not watching anything from that promotion that I don't absolutely want to watch.
Sure.
But I'm friends with enough people that are still dyed-in-the-wool Lion Mark guys that I know they are living in fear and they are living in great concern of the future of New Japan. And for Tanahashi to come in here and give his high flow to Yuki Yoshioka is one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
The one thought that goes through my mind about the overall situation, and then like the youngsters in New Japan, and shouldn't you kind of be at a point where we already know who Tanahashi is having that retirement match with and who he's going to give that to, and he just comes into Dragon Gate, makes his second appearance in a year, goes, "You're from my hometown, you do a frog splash, it's now the high fly flow now, and I think you should be ace." And what to say about the situation in New Japan? Seems like it's none of our business. Things are okay. Like I do not have to care about that. And
it's fine. It's fine by me. It was my I'm a busy guy, Mike, and to not be bogged down with all these great G1 matches is really, it's a glass half full perspective to know that I'm not going to have to dedicate a ton of time to the G1 this year.
Yeah. Issues with like finding young stars, not my problem.
No.
thanks for being here, Hiroshi Tanahashi. It was great to see you.
It's the 30 under 30 thing, you know. If you don't like the amount of Dragon Kid guys on the list, who's supposed to be on there? Because it's not any of the New Japan guys, you know. And I say that as somebody who I feel like everybody's mind is made up about, you know, Narita and Umino now, but I'm strictly anti Yuya Uemura. I think that guy sucks, and so I wouldn't have him on my 30 under 30. And so then it gets really bleak if you're looking at that New Japan list, especially the heavyweight side of things.
And not to go one versus one here, it's very interesting to see people who are so staunchly in defense of Yuya Uemura, just like star power or like potential of him as like a big star, and then they have huge issues of Yuki Yoshioka. Have you noticed that?
I'm not necessarily in a 1-to-1 comparison, but I see what you mean.
Maybe it's not 1-to-1, but I feel like that similar conversations are being had from like parties that would do that, and I have to say, coming out of this, it was basically exactly as you expected for the Yoshioka recovery tour, where you get like the traveling veteran from like another promotion coming by and saying, like, giving him the seal of approval, you know, like this felt like exactly as you would expect.
I still feel like Uemura is not the second coming of Tanahashi, but the second coming of Sonata, and I find him to just be a dreadfully boring wrestler. So again, Tanahashi just doing the funniest thing possible. I say this with all the love in the world because they do such a great job, and I love their show. The Super J-Cast tweet about this made me laugh uproariously. Fantastic job by them. Very sorry that New Japan is doing all the things that New Japan is doing, but a credit to you, Hiroshi Tanahashi, for giving me a good laugh.
Yeah, sorry that's happening to you all. Big, not my problem. I learned sometimes when to keep my mouth shut.
This would be one of those times.
Yeah. What I do not want to keep my mouth shut about was a moment that could take a match down from 4.5 stars to 4.25 stars just by being 2 feet to the side case. And that was the story of the Open the Brave Gate title match. UT losing his second defense against Ryoya Tanaka. He comes out with a new theme music. And for what I'd like to say and congratulate him for that, because I know how desperately he wanted that. And we got to see UT be the counter wrestler, trying to counter his way out of everything from Ryoya Tanaka, being able to go cross saber, convert it into a fuego right into the Bien Llave. But that was just not enough. A kick out of a first cross saber, not enough. And then it took the Joker Striker to the legs, sadly, to win the belt for Ryoya Tanaka. He's the Brave Gate champion. We've been waiting for this moment for him, and it happens. It's just going to be a shame that they might show the finish case, but they're going to like edit out like the last 12 frames of the shot.
Outstanding stuff from Tanaka. This is the kind of match that I always knew he was capable of. It's the kind of match that he delivered on. UT as Brave Gate champion. He gave us 3 really interesting, really unique matches. You know, the Hamare match was something special at Dead or Alive. It felt like we got the best Hamare match by that point in his career, at least a singles match. And we got the definitive UT performance. He rolls that into a junior match that I feel like as time goes on, I actually have grown a greater appreciation of that match. It's one that lives a little bit rent-free in my head now, where I'm just constantly thinking about how snug that work was, how good that work was between UT and Mochizuki Jr. And then you get this one where up until that finish, which wasn't UT's fault, it was Ryoya Tanaka's fault, it was the exact match that it should have been, where Tanaka, as an underdog babyface fighter, wrestled an incredible match. UT was positioned as this dominant veteran who had a hold for every counter that Tanaka had for all of his holds. And it all was a beautiful performance from both guys up until that finish. It knocked the wind out of me. You had to deduct. I was going to go 4.25, ended up going 4 stars on this. But man, up until that finish, what a fun match.
Yeah, it was like so cool. Like even like the idea that this was the one move that Tanaka never pulled out in any of the matches. So if you go with the idea, and I thought that Jay was excellent on commentary of Ho-Ho throughout the show, bringing up the fact that UT in the build-up constantly was finding like taking these moves, but you've seen at least UT versus Junior in the lead up to that he would take the moves, but then be able to, when the match counts, convert it into something else, learning on from experience there. The Joker Strizer was the one thing he didn't hit. So you almost had like this perfect story of like, oh, he just had one more weapon the one weapon that UT was not prepared for. Like that is for the fourth match on a card that was just like the ancillary singles title. That's such a compelling match that it's just a shame that it just had to be 2 feet to the left.
For Tanaka, he's going to have all of Love and Peace with the exception of Ben to work with. So Hyokame Rita Jr., I could see them mixing in Daiki, possibly not Fuda. I don't really see that being a possibility. You've always got the outside shot of a Kagatora match or a Dragon Kid match. There's the possibility of a Dragon Dia match that I think would be super interesting. You've got Homare in the fold. And then depending on how long he sticks around, you could throw Flamita at him as well. So plenty to choose from for Tanaka in his first reign. I hope this goes a while. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. The last kind of main show match, the 3 matches before this were just exactly what you expect out of a Dragongate undercard on a big show. They get you in and out, Case. And you get on to the stuff that matters, like this no disqualification match. Strong Machine J versus Madoka Kakuta. A TKO finish after Kakuta sets up a barbed wire board so that the board part was facing towards Kakuta and the barbed wire was facing towards Strong Machine J in the corner. And then probably for a man who does as many hip attacks as he does, the most devastating hip attack in Madoka Kakuta's career, sending the barbed wire into Strong Machine J's face, exploding the board. The only Mr. Nakagawa can do is immediately call the referees to send TKO knockout for Madoka Kakuta, and kind of an absolute war in a lot of different tenses of the word, and very freewheeling in a way that in a match that like you had people bouncing off like the edges of tables, it just added to kind of the passion I felt like of this no DQ match. Case.
Well, I wrote this in my review. It reminded me of a Bryan Danielson brawl, which is about the highest sort of praise that I can give outside of maybe a Chuck Taylor Plunder match. You know, the great thing about all of their interactions in the lead up to this has been how organic and how heated it's felt. It hasn't been overly contrived. The brawling has been concise. The brawling has felt really real and impactful and in the moment. And they continued that here. This wasn't a setup plunder spot sort of match. Outside of the 2 table spots, I mean, everything they did was very fluid and rolled in from, one spot to the next with an incredibly memorable finish. So I thought they knocked it out of the park. I went 4 stars on this one as well. I just really liked the work they did. I thought they worked this in a really smart way. I thought the finish made Kakuta look incredible. And Strong Machine J, for all of the doubts I've had about him through various points in his career, wondering if he was capable of being a Dragon Gate wrestler at one point, to wondering if he was ever going to be able to elevate himself to a mid-card position, or rather past a mid-card position, to wondering if he was actually going to be capable of leading a unit. And every time I doubt Strong Machine J, I have to give him credit because he always finds a way to prove me wrong. And I think 2025 has been the best year of his career between the YAMATO match and this Kakuta feud. I think he's done marvelous work. And for as good as Kakuta was in this, I thought Jay held his own. I thought Jay, in sort of his unhinged charisma approach to this match, I thought was just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and it's really been like the way that Kakuta has performed since Dead or Alive. This was kind of expected of him in the way he's been in the lead up here. For Jay, ever since the mask ripping and all that really kicked off, seeing him add this kind of element to his arsenal, it really fleshes him out in a real kind of interesting way to me. Like the way that I'm thinking about Strong Machine J, and it's like, okay, where does Natural Vibes now really kind of go from this, where basically it's KZ, Strong Machine J, and UT because Flamita now is a Triangle Gate champion with another team that are of completely unaffiliated guys. And if you were to ask me where do they go, or Strong Machine J go after this, if you asked me that last year, Case, I would have been like, well, seems like it's a time to close up shop with Natural Lives. I mean, that's kind of how we were thinking about that a few months ago. But now, I don't know, because it feels like Kakuta's kind of moved on after this. Like, the aspect of where does Vibes go next? Like, I think eventually you're going to have to do that Triangle Gate match with everyone versus Team Mexico. But
Kakuta's moved on for now, but the benefit of if he beats Shun for the Dreamgate belt is you have a built-in Strong Machine J match at some point.
Yeah, so you have all of that, but I just like the fact that now Strong Machine J has an edge. I kind of want to see him incorporate that more so towards the rest of the roster, and that's where I kind of go from this is like, okay, now that we know that Strong Machine J, he might not be a plunder god yet, but he shows some signs. I'm like, now, like, what does a J-led like plunder match look like? And now if Jay's put in a situation, another blood feud, I'm already going to be chomping at a bit for another no DQ match of this, because I just find him such a compelling, hardcore plunder wrestler at this point.
I'm with you.
It's just like the right match and the right guy to kind of do the deed, take the bullet for Kakuta for what happened later on in the night. Like, Kakuta had to murder him because Kakuta was going to have to take out Shun Skywalker and do big guy work in the main event post-match angle. So this might be a match coming out of Kobe World Weekend where in the future, when we're talking about like Kobe World, we're like 2030 and we're talking about like, oh yeah, let's go through like a moment where it's like, do you remember like in 2025, the incredible like mini feud that was happening between Madoka Kakuta and Strong Machine J? I think history, and I feel like we will look back on this a lot more fondly the further we get away from this match. Like this, it's probably going to be the sleeper match of the show when we look back at it.
I would agree with that.
Let's run through the first three matches on the show. They were not a whole lot to them, as one would expect for these shows. You opened with Paradox versus Mochizuki Dojo. You got to see a lot of Aki getting involved with Paradox coming back from his injury, but he eats a Yokosuka cutter to lose the match. Paradox wins. Ultimo, Fuji, Kanda, and Sachihoko Boy versus Kung Fu Masters 2 with Mondai Ryu. It was a La Magistral on Punch in about 3 minutes. And then the Gaora TV 5-way match, Takashi versus KZ versus Naruki Doi versus Kai versus Masaki Mochizuki. A cyber bomb on Kai retains the match, or retains the belt for Takashi. And not to say I had very low hopes for this 5-way match. It was not a bad 10-minute stretch. It ended up being like a fun enough time, if only for like the moments of like Kai doing the Ganosuke special and the moment of like, oh, are we now having the Gaora TV title now? Is it coming to Dragon Gate? Like, having those moments was fun for me.
It was fine. Yeah, it was not as bad as I was fearing that it might be.
And that was Kobe World 2025 case. As we said at the top, definitely not one of the best Kobe Worlds of all time, but definitely left us with that post-match main event that has our wheels spinning about Dragon Gate going forward, especially on that road to Dangerous Gate coming up in August.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way you can't be excited about everything that's to come, given the show closing angle, the tremendous match between Skywalker and YAMATO, and no matter the result of Skywalker versus Kakuta, you're looking at a scenario in which either Shun Skywalker is your Open the Dreamgate champion, which is always going to be entertaining, or Kakuta's the Dreamgate champion, and the way they choose to do that should be very entertaining. So a lot to like going forward.
Yep, and that is what we will have coming up for Dragon Gate in the weeks ahead. Case, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we got out of here?
I did not.
All right, that's going to do it this week for us on Open the Voice Gate. You can follow us on social media at Open VoiceGate. Case is at _InYourCase on Twitter. Keep your eyes peeled for Case's interview with Tony Khan, 10 o'clock Central Time tomorrow, July 16th. I'm on Twitter at Fujiheya. That's it for Open the Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network.
Love Japanese pro wrestling? Want coverage of the entire scene, men's and women's promotions from New Japan to Stardom, Noah, All Japan, DDT, Mari Gold, and more? Then Wrestling Omakase is the podcast for you. Hosted by a 23-year Puro watching veteran, that's me, John Carroll, and a rotating cast of co-hosts, we bring you a passionate, knowledgeable look at the wide world of Japanese wrestling. Wrestling Omakase is right here on the Voices of Wrestling Network. Check us out on any podcast app or feed today.
We all know that owning a small business means you wear many hats, but sometimes you really need an extra pair of hands. Upwork is how good companies find great and trusted freelance talent. With more than 2 decades of experience, with the simple and ambitious goal of pioneering a better way of working, companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in staffing key projects and initiatives. They access a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web dev, marketing, and more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, and get help drafting a job post or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them and take your business to the next level. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.